Hello, I'm Peter Borgen, librarian at the Hamline Midway Library in St. Paul, Minnesota. This is our 27th year of hosting the Fireside Reading Series, and we are thrilled to be able to carry on this tradition even in this unusual year. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Fireside Reading Series from our fireside. If you are here, we would love to offer you cookies and coffee or tea, and we'd all squeeze in together to the children's area for the evening to listen to great writers reading from their books and talk with them about their work. Obviously, this year is different, and we're very happy that you've chosen to join us in this new format to carry on our long tradition. Tonight, we are happy to feature Heid Erdrich with her book, Little Big Bully. The St. Paul Public Libraries have copies of our featured authors' books available for contactless hold pickup at the Hamline Midway Library or via our Library Express services at other library locations. You can find all the details at our website, www.sppl.org. I hope you are cozy wherever you are and that you enjoy tonight's event. Thank you for spending time with us.
Seven buttons later, hello everyone, and welcome to our final event in the Fireside Reading Series. I am Wendy Worden, the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library, and we're so pleased you decided to share the evening with us. As we get started this evening, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Dakota people, Indigenous keepers of the land from which I broadcast tonight. This land was reserved by the Dakota in the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux signed with the United States in 1851, and it remains sacred to them today. We also acknowledge the Ojibwe people, fellow Indigenous inhabitants of this land. The Dakota and Ojibwe peoples are the original stewards of stories in this place now called Minnesota, and we at the Friends honor that tradition and the knowledge and values embedded in it as we work to lift up storytellers in our state today. On to our main event. Fireside is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. We are so grateful for your support and your presence here this evening. We will begin with a reading and then open things up to questions from you. Feel free to put questions in the chat throughout the night, and I will relay them to Heid in the second half of the event this evening. As Peter said, we are pleased to have Heid Erdrich with us. It's always great to round out a season with a night of poetry. Heid Erdrich is the author of 7 collections of poetry. Her writing has won fellowships and awards from the National Poetry Series, Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, McKnight Foundation, Minnesota State Arts Board, Bush Foundation, Loft Literary Center, First Peoples Fund, and many other honors. She has twice won a Minnesota Book Award for poetry. Erdrich edited the 2018 anthology New Poets of Native Nations from Gray Wolf Press. She grew up in Wahpeton, North Dakota, and is Ojibwe enrolled at Turtle Mountain. Welcome, Heid.
Thank you. Buju, Anin Dinwe Magandok, Heid Erdrich Indigenous Jaganashimong, Amajikwe Indigo. Makwandoram. I'm Heid Erdrich, and I introduced myself in Ojibwe Moen, as I was taught to do by my teachers after I moved to Minnesota. I'm in North Dakota right now, where I grew up, in my sister Angie's childhood, teenage years bedroom that she decorated with a rainbow theme. And I'm going to give you exclusive footage of the rainbow on the ceiling if you can see it. I don't know, you can't really, the lighting is not great, but I'm literally under the rainbow as I read to you tonight. I'm grateful to the Friends and to the Hamline Midway Library. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Wendy, for arranging things. I have often been able to stand in front of that fireplace, give a reading, and watch as you all snuck back and got a cookie and a cider. So tonight I'm going to imagine you out there grabbing some cookies and cider. I'll want to thank Angie for doing the captioning and doing it without notes that I wasn't able to provide. So thank you very much. And I hope that everyone is able to follow along with my comments. I'm going to read from Little Big Bully. This is my new book and it came out in October. It came out from Penguin Editions in New York, and it is one of the books of the pandemic that I haven't been able to really spend a lot of time reading from. So I really appreciate this chance tonight. I'm going to start with the first poem in the collection that's not in one of the sections, but is sort of a poem that starts the thinking that launched the book. Loves. How I love you, how we hang on words, how eaten with need, how we need to eat, how weevils sift the wheat, how cold it is, how thick with hoar frost, ice slick, sleet freeze, how wintry the mixed, how full of angst, how gut sick, how blue-lipped, how we drink a health, how we care, how easy over as eggs, how it all slides, how absurd, how yet tender we all, how wrapped in a thick coat, how battered, how slender the flesh, how we wrap ourselves, how many selves we all, how I miss you many, how I see you, how your eyes warm mine, how tiny am I inside, how enormous my need, how you open an old-fashioned satchel, how deep it yawns, how bleak this need, how like winter, how it yet catches the light, how brilliant the sundogs, perihelion, moondogs, paraselene phenomenon optic, how fetching your spectacles, how my thumb might fit alongside the slope of your nose, how my own glasses slide down my thin bridge, how ridiculous the theory of the land bridge, how inane the bibble babble, how we grew to be friends, how we grew thumbs, how opposable we all, how we grew sparks, how we blew up a fire, how angry, how incensed, how we resist, how we beat up drops, how water will not run, how we distract, how loud the dog snores, how loudly, how noisy the snow grows, how many degrees below, how we fret, how again, how we all came here, how did we come, how did we, how loves, how did we come to this? So that's the poem that is starting the collection, and I'm excited about reading through. I'm going to read a few poems from the first section and a few poems from the last section, and then tonight I'm going to give you bonus selections that got kicked out of the book. Sovereign Love. When I look upon the beloved, the real beloved, not the beloved of memoirs made up in revenge, but the active generator of love, the love maker. When I look upon you, beloved, I might avert my gaze, let it stray only to your hands, then up to your throat. It is only in holding your eyes away from mine that I can stay sovereign in my love. It is only for you, not from you. It is more than state or nation. This love is itself unto itself. The only name it needs, it speaks within me. Call it what you will, it will answer. This poem is called Not. And it's a poem of negation and a poem of witness of things that did not happen to me, but that I knew of when I was a girl. Not the girl in the Rambler staring out her window every summer, not allowed out. Not the girl whose dad left his pistol under the pillow where we jumped on the bed. Not the girl who wore only undershirts at home on her daddy's lap. Not the girl who cleaned, dressed, bathed, fed her little sister's dog food if she had to. Not the girl who could not read, who married the odd jobs man. Not the girl who parked with her dad on country roads, then by bars. Not the girl who thrilled at the drop-off kiss from the dad whose kids she babysat. Not the girl who got a car, got a puppy, got a trip when she gave her baby away. Not the girl whose cousin hit her with his rifle until she knelt and did it. Not the girl who never looked at me again, who never talked to me again, who never laughed. Not the girl who swore me not to tell, who told me I would die, who ran off and married. Not that girl, but another girl, and then another girl, and then so many, many girls when I was still a girl. Not the girl, but a woman who was not, has not, did not, would not, cannot, will not. It's a little weird to read that poem and then turn from it without a little something in between. So I'm gonna read a poem that needs just a tiny little note. It is about the night in November 2016 when military equipped police and sheriff's departments turned weapons that are not allowed in many parts of the US and in many countries are considered weapons of war only. And they were turned on protesters who were unarmed, who were praying and singing at Standing Rock. And this poem is called Territory Was Not Virgin and Neither Was I Virgin. Born overflowing, all giving, you never could take what we never gave, what I held back, sky fat with rain, water dropping my name slowly on my lips. No part of me you could remove from this water. She touches everything, never alone, so even what you broke blew up, bomb of droplets, collective, thunder, sounding, resounding. No wonder you grew afraid. My voice refused you, all of you. Erased even the names, faces, places they tried to take us. So only a steady music remains, the urgency of rain. Neither could you take it with your cannon that turns sound against bodies, profound vibration shot through bone, shock to the ears, the brain, the dreams, or water cannons, water usurped, turned to weapon, turned to ice, turned to burn. They waded away with water, took water back, dispersed the hurt across the globe of water, the only territory, the only country, the only kinship, the one we would not give. If we give ourselves to anything, we give ourselves to water. If I give myself to anything, I give myself to water. Not bride or prize or slave, but daughter, then grown woman, then wave next to wave next to wave, no more yours than rain, rain dropping slowly. So even you could hear it, knows you, knows your name. So those are some poems that have at their heart events and ways of resisting. But there are also a few poems in the book that were written after 2019, at the very beginning of 2020, when I began to be aware that we were going to start wearing masks. And we came home from traveling, my family and we tried to stay away from each other and not touch each other for fear that we might have picked up the new virus. And this is called Face to Face. How can you stop touching your face when I can barely resist touching your face? It's the septum I crave. And now, but for now, our quarantine is Joker, taunting Batman. It's right under your nose. We've seen nothing like this all these long days between us. Every question unanswered makes me want to coax the words, stroke your, I look it up, philtrum, love charm. Oh, I can withhold. My touch retreats from your eminence, your arch, your cheek plane, chin orbit, your brow ridge, temples, your notch, your fossa, basin of tears, your lobe, your canal. No, those do not so much tempt me, but that slope and dip, tenderest of ports my pinky fits, where spirit pushed a fingertip into the clay of us, hushed us with a touch so that we would not tell all that we saw and must forget in order to be born, in order to shine the way your eyes shine. Oh, stop it with your eyes. Your eyes just lead me to your smile, and then above it to that Cupid's bow. I wish and wish I could plant a kiss, draw all that forgotten knowledge out. But so many touches undone, between murdered, between want and what we must, we must. We close our eyes in two beds, too much risk to sleep foot to head, and breathe our dreams into the one thing we once were, truly not knowing we ever will be again. So those are poems in the first section. I'm just glancing at the comments. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Kristen. Let's see who else is out there. Hi, Big Bird. Mimi, Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Tanya. Hi, new friend. Let's see. Sherry Lee, Mary Saunders, Samantha, Kate, BFF Kate, and Janet. How nice. Some of my old students and good friends. Thank you so much for showing up. You're all so true blue. And I'm really grateful to have so many of you here too tonight. You know how hard this, we couldn't do this in the fireside room. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to do this. I'm going to read some poems from the last section. There's two sections in between, and I'm going to mention some of their titles just so you kind of get a sense of what happens in the book. The book deals with abuse and mechanisms of abuse. How does abuse work? How are notions instilled into a person so that they are less able to resist abuse? And how is that happening on a political, social, cultural level to people, especially women and people of color and Indigenous people? And that's what a lot of the book is about. So there's some poems that bring that into a more familiar political context. There's a poem called Melania Won't Leave You, though she retires to her private island, Melanesia, and learns the Tongan word taboo. There's a poem called Big Sir about a big old bully. There's poems about treaty making and how bullying mechanisms are included in treaties. And then the last section of the book is mostly dedicated to my children, who are young adults now, and who I went through the polar vortex of 2019 pretty much in lockdown with my daughter, and we watched a lot of scary movies, and we talked about isolation and what it meant for people in times past to be self-sufficient and so forth. And I'm glad that we went through that time 2 years ago. It gave me a lot of writing to do, but it also prepared us for what we were going to do. And in that case, I thought a lot about my kids. So this is a poem about getting an Ojibwe name and how in Ojibwe language, there's no gender, and the idea that you could name a child without any gender repercussions. would be, I think, a wonderful thing in the language. This is called How It Escaped Our Attention. When a whole being births into your hands, still you see your hands, no matter how unworldly the beauty of the child. Then the universe of words works past cosmology to a useful name, a handle, in English, unlike the indigenous genderless language of verbs. Moon blues, comet misses, moon looms super, moon bleeds, many cosmological shifts later. Our hands eclipsed by the lovely being come so far, come closer than ever across the several heavens, Ojibwe name, the layers of our atmosphere, and further out there, the fourth sky, forever sky. When you first came to us, we did not have an Ojibwe name to know the sky beyond the sky beyond the sky. How were we to know? He was, she was, they are, you. How were we to know who? So that's a poem about gender and parenting in English, basically, and the choices it makes us make. I've got 2 more poems from the book. I'm gonna drink more. It's not a giant kavita, it's just water. I'm sure that there are people out there, but mostly I have the ridiculous feeling that I'm sitting in my sister's room reading to myself. So put a note in. Let's see what's on here now. Hi, Bobby, Patricia Olson, Mary Wallem, Catherine Day, Vicky. Very nice to see everybody. Chris Biak, thank you. Okay, this was the poem that came out of watching bad movies. And there was a movie, and it's one of my most hated movies because, see if you can guess which movie this is. In the movie, suddenly climate change dramatically makes the planet incredibly cold. And there's a group of young people and librarians trapped in New York City in the library, and they decide to burn the books, which is a terrible thing. Yes, Samantha, correct. And we watched that poem, and I was so proud of my daughter. I realized that I trained her well. So this is called Oh Terrible Movie. Slogging on snowshoes 40 urban miles. Ice crevasses replaced by glass roof of a mall. Manhattan's the destination, of course. Terrible movies require a ruined New York City circa 2007. A climate collapse, at least telegraphed. Art direction's not bad. Lady Liberty iced over, hair blown into icicles, 100 feet long. Simpatico audience in this polar vortex, 2019. We huddle in a house blazed to 60 degrees. Not bad, but drafts dance cobwebs, frosted windows ping, the whole house groans. We groan too. Oh, terrible movie. How we love thee. Disaster flicks. Train our kids to win the apocalypse. So proud when the kid knows the heroes got it wrong. He doesn't even have on gloves. Use food to distract the wolves. Odd intimacy when we holler, oh no, because the refuge turns out to be the library. Librarians portrayed as passive and nerdy. Who are they? Librarians we know could find the Holy Grail shelved in mysteries somewhere, or at least know how to research our values of newsprint, corn chip fuel, and hand sanitizer fire starters. Never mind, I'm already proud. As soon as she sees the stacks, our kid yells, outraged, "Let me guess, they burn the books." She never would, but reader, they do. I'm excited to hear how that one maybe translates, because sometimes you write a poem and you feel like it's too private, too personal, too specific to you, and you wonder if anybody else gets it. This was going to be the last poem in the collection, but I acquiesced to my editor who wanted me to put a different poem last, and I figured I could just read it last anyhow. So here I go. This is the last poem. And it kind of matches that how poem I began the book with, because it sort of answers how. If I give you a last lesson, if we had just these moments, I would tell you, stand close as I write, hold my shoulders, last touch, then I'll be gone. How to watch me go, how my being will dwindle, I'll twilight, how to stand here alone when I am gone, feel the vibrant earth rotate through you until your head accepts, how to listen for what's left of me, my voice that jolts you out of weekend sleep, that wonders what you eat, asks you to demand real love from anyone you give your sweetest self. How to take into yourself all the structures I pointed out, the physical logic, my rationale, the critical angle you can use so quickly your wit can outrace your body, and give you that moment to jump. How to jump when an enemy, how to know which branch, which roof, which window, how to yearn for blue shores, moments alone when you know all you will know and can read it back to yourself. How to relearn what you don't know, how to dive, hold your breath so bubbles fill with water popping, full of reflections of your own face, and you are not alone, you are not afraid. How to not be afraid, you can say it. I am not afraid to learn. How to live with the hurt of being human. How you learn it is you say it, it hurts. How in itself it is the lesson. How you say, gone now and still here. Now, watch me go. My being will dwindle, I'll twilight, and other words that combine W with another consonant unexpectedly. That last to make you laugh. Last lesson you live all your life. So when you go, you pass it on. So thanks for listening to the poems in Little Big Bully. I'm going to read some bonus poems that were not included, that I left the collection at some point. And they're on Poetry Northwest. And I know that there is a link up at Poetry Northwest. And they were just published. And the first poem I'm reading is called Muskegue. And this poem, Muskegue, has an entry from Wikipedia at the top that explains that muskegs consist of dead plants. And muskegs are considered a place where there's no life. Very different idea in Ojibwe, as you'll see in the poem. That brown water, there's nothing in it. No fish. Water brown with tannin. Shot through with golden light. Green moss below. Seen through reflection of blueness, grayness, redness. There's nothing in it. Where it's water, where it's not. deeper than it looks, the gathering ground, the medicine place. There's everything in it. That place, that water. In the end, there's a note that Mashkig is a swamp, and it's related to the word mashkiki, which is to make medicine to heal. And it's a poem that looks better on the page than it does reading. That poem, Muskeg, is voiced by me and part of an installation in Brussels in a museum intervention, which took part of the museum and returned it to a swamp, flooded it, grew swamp plants in it, because the word for the city means swamp. So luckily, Andrea Carlson invited me to add some audio to that group installation. This poem is called Not the Memory, but the Memory of Remembering. Sailboat curtains, white triangles in a blue field, coated flags on our porch, our glassed porch, our storage porch, rollaways, boxes, bikes, barrels, on a mattress on our porch beside sailboats, when just before I hurt the worst, went limp, when just before the light hurt through me, so hot, went white behind my eyes, against the pipe, the burn now opened below my belly eye, my button shut. One of the boys laughs at, boy pokes at, seared full thickness, my flinch, salve smells, looks like mustard. How did it hold her? Crawl, space, dark, so small, kick away, then limp. The pipes jump in that old house. The boy didn't know how hot, how dark, how small, how scarred. So, the memory of an accident. And then this last poem is called Women of Water Run Dry. And it's part of a series that I didn't include in the book. Work days. The well of works so deep, I never saw the bottom yet. Our job, they say, to care for the water, we women. In this desert, we women take care of what water may be. Nights later, smell of desert sky, everything inverted. Sky, the water, earth full of metal. Earth maps an unknown world. Moon is not working any lake I can hear. I wonder how she waves. When we see each other, moon turns the blue of day over spikes of plants I once knew in another desert. Turned upside down, glad for my heaviness, my willingness to cling and climb. Nothing rooted here makes a handhold, all thorn and barb. I cannot fall until I sleep. I cannot let go. Perhaps the same day, doves talk to me. Why people say they cry or sob or mourn or coo, I do not know. Listen, they said, and I heard. She-birds, the roar of a crowd at kids' sports. Then the strangled sound of males approaching. How does that racket attract? It does not. She and she and she say, watch us now. Do we submit? You do not, I note, disturbed. The he-dove cries as if yanked by the throat. He dives. She-doves scatter, and then, in fact, they do complain. Sound plaintive, communal. Hurry over here, dears. He's come for another one of us. This way, oh, go away. You see, we never free of him. Another day. A knotted juniper tree, offering tree, its own tree. Final day. The well of work so deep, I never saw the bottom yet. This desert and I, one of the women of water. We have one concern, as above as below, wide and worrisome, all we know is to run and run and run. And even when we can no longer run, still we run when we run dry. So thank you for that. It's exciting to be able to have read to everybody. I know you're out there, although you're quiet. And I could answer some questions now.
It's still strange, even almost a year in, to be like just emoting into the void like this.
I think it's getting stranger for me. I don't know why, but it feels stranger.
So yes, there have been questions coming in. Thank you, dear audience, and so much love for you, Heid. I'm sure you've been catching that, so that's good. We've got from Janet asking if you could talk about the writing process for this particular collection of poems. Did the poems come first, or did the sort of casing for them?
You know, I had just a few poems that I had a sense that there was something I wanted to write about changes in the way people were relating to each other. And then toward the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019, I just started cranking out poems on this idea of what is narcissistic abuse? When do we get, groomed for it? How are we all, experiencing a sort of massive cultural abuse of narcissism? And I just started cranking out poems, and I wrote more than half of the poems in a very short time, and finished them all in the beginning of 2019, and sent the book out for a poem contest because it was such a huge undertaking. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to send this out. Which prize here gives you the most money? And I sent it out and was absolutely stunned to win. Absolutely, utterly stunned. I've never been so surprised by anything in my life. It was a great feeling, and I hope everybody gets one moment like that. So that's sort of the process. Was I felt them all together. They came together. They worked with some poems I had done before, and I just, maxed myself out getting it done. And it was a great experience.
It's fantastic to hear. I love it when so often you hear, I was sort of pulling things and I was dragging it from me. It's great.
It was very different from my usual process.
Samantha asking if there was ever a point while writing that you had trouble with revisions, and what are some of your tactics for combating the block when the words aren't quite coming right?
Yeah, I haven't been writing much this year, and I finally sort of understand how difficult that can be. But mostly, I give myself permission to just do something cruddy. I don't care if it's good or not. I just do it, and I don't have huge expectations of what's going to happen with my work. I just can't. If I did that, I think it would be very difficult to write. I often tell my students I don't believe in writer's block. I just believe you don't, have anything to write about at the moment. It's not a fatal condition. You can always come out of it. So I just let myself think about, this is just a moment where it's not my best, but something's coming. But that said, I don't write every single day. That's just not my way. I like to kind of think about things, noodle about, have them in my head for a long time, and then get them on paper when I feel confident that they've held up to my attention.
It's so great to hear. Like, it's not a fatal condition. Like, you just don't have anything right now.
Yeah, it's temporary.
Darlena is asking if you've been studying Ojibwe language the whole time that you've been writing, and if not, how has learning Ojibwe impacted your writing?
Thank you, Darlene. Hi. I am a poor student of languages, and I always have been. I've studied many languages, but when I came to Minnesota, I'd studied Cree in college, which is a somewhat related language. When I came to Minnesota, I finally got the chance through community teaching to study Anishinaabe, and I realized again I was not going to be a good student. One thing that I've always been good at, though, is that I can read and kind of find the core of the language. and have some natural understanding of how it functions. Even if I don't speak it well, I've never been good at speaking other languages. So in learning Anishinaabe I really felt like I was beginning to understand a different worldview that is reflected in and part of the language, and the respect for movement and states of being and reflexive states where we do something with someone else, and that's the core of our grammar. Our movement, our actions, our behaviors, those things really struck me, and that changed in many ways the way I wrote. But it also reminded me of how I write in English. As a poet, I've always felt the powerhouse of the poem is the verb, and that's why I avoid, forms of the verb to be, because they're mushy to me. Is, was, were, those things don't do as much for me as, dance, dance, danced. So those two things, and I realized, languages probably were more verb based. And what did that mean about how we feel the world, how we experience the world? So yeah, thank you for that question. I really appreciate that one.
I love hearing that sort of perspective. My language nerd brain gets very happy when I think about the way other languages sort of figure the world, and that really, that's meaty stuff. I like it. I love also scrolling through this chat and going, oh, everyone is cheering virtually. There's
I'm trying to look at it quickly too, just so.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris Bordeaux from Pine Ridge. Washte, we say here. I can't remember what you all say out there.
Tracy is asking about the ecological elements, nature and spirituality in your work. Can you talk about that particular?
Yeah, I am, I'm very much was raised in a small town on the prairie, very much loved being in nature as a child, and I didn't see a real distinction between indoors and outdoors. It was, the idea that there was always connection to other living things was a big part of how I was raised, both by my mom and my dad. So I think it's really natural for me. It's not like a political decision. It's not, I don't even, really fit with the eco poetic and other things. I've never really been tapped to be that nature poet. So, but I have a strong feeling for our protection of the water and the teachings that I have had as an Ojibwe woman after I moved to Minnesota, that we take care of the water. It's so much part of our being that I think that it's something that we should always think about. And I mean, really, what else is there? This is how we live. We human beings survive off of all what's elementally there for us. And so we should protect it. That's why I'm really happy about Deb Haaland, by the way. Really, Deb Haaland, who's up for Interior Secretary, who cares about the bears. I was like, yes, Makwa.
Important. I'm interested also in I think it was Nancy asking about the way you sort of prepare to read a poem. Do you think about where you were when you were writing it, and are you getting into that space? I think it's an interesting question, just because it's so much of poetry is that sound element, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. What's weird about the pandemic is that we're reading sitting down, and I haven't figured out a good way to read standing up yet. And, I'm trying to project from my diaphragm, so I physically have to get into that new place. And each of these poems is like a whole kind of crux of emotions and thoughts and philosophies, and sometimes memories, and some of them are quite personal. So yes, I take a breath, I prepare, I try to be in that poem, whereas normally I might be thinking of the poem I just read, so I have to shift between them. I've learned it's a little harder actually doing it just to myself, just on screen. Thanks, Elk River.
Let's see here. Jim is saying wants to hear a little bit more about avoiding the mushiness of to be, and how do you manage to avoid that verb?
Well, I just think about how the word is can almost always be substituted for something else, you know, an action, and be more specific and provide more visual or sensory or auditory information. Um, so why use that sort of placeholder motion when you could really move towards something else? I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable, but for my part, I feel like it's a moment to be more specific.
Sorry, my eternal writing student is just like, yes, that's a very good way to be putting that. I'm like scribbling things. They're like, do your job, Wendy.
Hi, Jim Ratty from Wapaton. I remember. Hi. I'm in Wapaton right now.
I am with whoever is asking about the artwork and how it connects with the theme of the book.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, it's by Andrew Carlson, and there's an artist statement in the back of the book. Andrea is a good friend of mine. I've worked with her a lot. And in fact, when I was working on this book, I went to Chicago and she gave me kind of a mini residency in her apartment. And I worked, you know, all day. And then we talked all night and all the next day about what I, you know, was writing and what she was painting and creating, and the connections between the things we were doing and the things we were trying to say about life and about witnessing and about listening to what wants to come through you in a way, you know, because sometimes you don't know what you're doing. You have to just pause and listen for it. I can't describe it any other way. You have to wait for it to come to you, you know, in a way that makes sense, that this is what I'm going to do. This is what this project's going to be. So we talked for a long time and I came to an understanding of what I was doing with the book, Little Big Bully. Andrea, amazing artist. This is a print from High Point Print Center. I actually have this print in my home. I'm really lucky through the generosity of others to live with it. It has pearlized inks and dozens of inks on it. It is an image of Man Mound, which is, it's called in English, which is a mound in Wisconsin, and one of the few remaining human figural mounds that still exists in the US. And there's trail tree markers and other parts of the landscape that might appear menacing, but had protective qualities in to the cultures that come from these places, and were guiding guideposts. The trail trees, the crooked trees that were formed into these shapes pointed toward areas that were important to people, and the same with other markers. And so she calls that image, which is called Exit, she calls it a sigil for against loss and fear. And I wrote this book to get past fear and to help others get past fear. And the two things really combined. So I'm really grateful that Andrea allowed me to use it, and that my publisher Penguin was able to produce the book with the cover.
It's really fantastic, and I was reading the artist statement and was so thrilled that I'm always through that corridor visiting people in Milwaukee, and now I will have this in my head when I'm there. So it's
yeah. She says it's about being on I-94 and things up I-94 west of St. Paul. And I have many poems east of St. Paul. I have many poems about west of St. Paul on I-94. So we also had that in common. I forgot about that part.
no, that was great. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that into the world because it's wonderful. Let's see, we got a little bit of time left.
I like Tonya. Can I answer?
Yeah, yeah.
Locklear. What are your thoughts on using tribal language when writing poems? It's difficult. However, when I first started doing language, I did a protocol we have. I brought tobacco to the teacher and asked him if he would teach me. And he said, yes, if you use the language. And he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a writer and a teacher. And he said, I want you to, always use the language in some way. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be anything, but that's what you want to do because it's alive and you need to live with it. So I don't know, everybody has different traditions, but that's the one that I committed to, that even if I made a mistake, even if I felt shy about it, I would do what he asked of me in turn for learning about the language.
Yeah, thank you. It's like, I don't want to scroll past that one. I was trying to see what was there.
Anine Grand Marais.
I like that one. Let's do the significance of the septum and forgetting what was learned before birth.
Yeah, I just, that was cheap research. I just looked it up on the internet, and somebody said that one myth about how this little thing came to be in our human faces was from when we were clay, that the spirit pushed their finger in there and it made us forget everything we learned before we were born. And before we were born, we knew everything. I love that idea. And that made us forget somehow. So
it's a mystery. We just need to accept that.
Yeah, and I needed something more to know about the septum, which I realized that we don't get to see as much with our masks on. And I find it a very fetching part of the human face.
I love that.
And some people don't have one, but it doesn't mean, maybe those people know everything.
Maybe they do. Now I'm going to be looking like.
I guess I'm attracted to the ignorant ones, but that's okay. We're all babies of the universe together.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Well, we talk about the gender, the lack of gender in the language and naming of children. And
yeah, that's really interesting to me, different naming traditions. And I just remember sitting on my bed, having had my first child after really hard labor and some NICU stay afterwards, and they asked me to fill something out with the baby's name. And I thought, you're asking me in my state to put a name down that this baby will legally carry? Well, that's a mad situation. But we all do it, and our parents all did it, and their grandparents, and the Western tradition. And to me, it makes really no sense. Anishinaabe tradition, I don't think it's a bad thing to say. We can have other names. We can have names at different points in our lives. We just have to, ask for them and have them sent to the namer. So that, to me, the more I got to understand that tradition living in Minnesota, the more right it felt to me that we could have different names at different points in our lives, and they help us. And I also liked the idea of having, no gender in the language, which is no gender pronouns, I should put it that way. And I'm sorry that my gender pronouns are not on my name. Usually they are, but they started falling off. So anyhow, it's she. And yeah, so I just thought, how easy that would make it for people who have shifts in gender or have an unacknowledged gender or misgendered life, what it would have mean to them to not have a name with a gender attached. And I just think it might change the way we look at each other and think about gender.
yeah, yep. And I don't want to stop chatting, but I think we're going to start wrapping up here this evening. It's been really amazing to speak with you, and I'm glad this book is in the world. And Naomi, Heid teaches creative writing at Augsburg in the MFA program, or
in the MFA program, and some of my former students are on there. It's exciting to see them out there. And right now I'm actually teaching a cohort at Washington and Lee University virtually, so I didn't get to go out there, unfortunately, but Have poetry lessons will travel is my name.
So good. But yes, thank you. Thank you to you, Heid. Of course, thank you, audience, whether you've been here just one evening or for all 6 weeks of this wonderful series this year. It's been amazing to speak with writers like Heid, and I feel very grateful to have been a part of it with all of you. I definitely hope we can all be eating cookies a year from now.
Let's hope.
But it's been a delightful evening. Thank you to Hamline Midway Library, and buy Heid's book if you don't have it already, because the poems are so visually appealing on the page. You need to see them as well. Choose your own adventures.
Thanks again.